Helps if I turn on my microphone north to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. This is a broadcast where you get the news, the real news. You get the news, you get analysis for fact. Strangely, in this nation at this time, the difference between news and fact is far too broad. We do something about it. We also offer analysis for fact, as I said, but we also offer commentary. That's the trickiest part of this show. A lot of people who do this job believe, for whatever reason, that their opinions are not just news, but they are the spoken word that you should follow religiously, almost. These are the same people that try to separate church and state, which, by the way, is already taken care of. The problem they have is that there is not a separation between God and state. And why do they have a problem with that? Well, quickly, I will tell you this. Our rights don't come from government. Our rights come from God. It's out of the reach of the United States government. That's one of the things that was set up in our founding papers. And therefore, in order to be able to essentially endow the people of the United States with rights, people in the government want it to be the government as opposed to God. If you wanted to know why all that was happening, there you go. Anyway, the tricky part about this broadcast is the commentary. I don't believe that my opinion needs to be chiseled into some rock somewhere and kept for the ages. Other people who do this job believe that. And that level of ego is not present here. I'm your neighbor. I'm your friend. I'm somebody who decided that somebody was going to report the news, and since nobody else was, I would do it. That decision happened over 20 years ago. The Wells Report's been on that long, and God willing, it'll keep going for a while. Cross your fingers. Let's get to the news. There is Second Amendment infringement news today. The supposed bipartisan Senate bill that CNN says makes meaningful progress toward passing the first major federal gun safety legislation in a generation has moved forward. So what's going on? Well, people have come up with a deal. Then the people who came up with the deal voted as to whether or not it should be presented to the full Senate. And that's the vote. The bill has not been voted on. It will be voted on. And it's got some hurdles to cross. Not only does it have some hurdles to cross, but it also is a circumstance where it's going to have trouble in the House of Representatives. Now, how many Democrats in the House of Representatives will be willing to vote against it? I don't know. I don't have any idea. But the politics, the legerdemain, and so on, well, there's just an awful lot of that has to continue before any of this goes anywhere. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about what we mean by all this. The Senate has made a procedural vote. It faces 2 more key votes to break a filibuster, then for final passage. The support of the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, in yesterday's vote, attracted more than the minimum 10 Republican votes that will be necessary to overcome a filibuster. In fact, 14 GOP senators voted for it. You will learn their names in a few moments. It could pass the Senate by week's end. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said then it would go on to the House. If passed, it would amount to the most significant new federal legislation to address gun violence since the expired 10-year assault weapons ban of 1994. Though it fails to ban any weapons and falls short of what Democrats and polls show most Americans want to see. Well, once again, I'm sorry, but this is CNN copy, so you can see that wishful thinking. Quote, as the author of the Brady Backgrounds Checks bill, which passed in 1994, I'm pleased that for the first time in nearly 30 years, Congress is back on the path to take meaningful action to address gun violence, said Chuck Schumer. The bill includes millions of dollars for mental health, school safety, crisis intervention programs, and incentives for states to include juvenile records in the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. It also makes significant changes to the process where when someone aged 18 to 21 goes to buy a firearm and closes the so-called boyfriend loophole, a major victory for Democrats who had been fighting for a decade to see it. So just exactly what is in the bipartisan bill? CBS reports as follows. It's called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. The measure is the Senate response to a pair of mass shootings, one at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, the other at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. That shocked the nation, spurred a group of senators to find consensus around a plan to reform gun laws. Hours after the bill's text was released, the plan cleared a procedural hurdle in the Senate with the backing of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Senate leaders are hoping it passes the upper chamber this week. 14 Republican senators voted with Democrats to begin debate on the bill, ensuring that there are enough votes to overcome a filibuster and advance to final passage. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has pledged to swiftly bring the bill to the House floor for a vote once it passes the Senate. The legislation is the culmination of a week of negotiations between a bipartisan group of senators, was unveiled 10 days after 20 Democrat and Republican senators announced a framework for the gun control plan. While the bill does not go as far as what President Biden has called for, some of the provisions, such as enhanced background checks for prospective gun buyers under 21, may have made a difference in preventing the massacres in New York and Texas, where both guns used, AR-15 style rifles, were purchased legally according to law enforcement. The suspected shooter in the Buffalo attack is 18 years old. The gunman in Uvalde was also 18. It would have subjected them to a more thorough background check under the proposed bill. So here's what's in the 80-page Safer Communities Act. The bill enhances background checks for firearm buyers under 21 years of age by requiring the National Instant Criminal Background Check System to check juvenile and mental health records through local law enforcement or state databases to determine whether a prospective gun buyer under 21 has a possibly disqualifying juvenile record. Under the plan, the system has up to 3 business days to conduct an initial search, up to 10 business days to complete additional investigations. It also provides $200 million for grants to states to upgrade criminal and mental health records for NICS, including grants to help states in providing disqualifying juvenile records. It clarifies the definition of a federally licensed firearms dealer. A person who buys and sells guns predominantly to earn a profit must register as a federal firearms licensee. It creates criminal penalties for straw purchases and gun trafficking. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives defined a straw purchase as when a person agrees to buy a gun for someone who is prohibited by law from purchasing one. State laws involve straw purchases vary. It closes the so-called boyfriend loophole. The plan adds those convicted of domestic violence against a person in a dating relationship, now defined as a relationship between two of individuals who have or have recently had a continuing serious relationship of a romantic or intimate nature, to the federal background check system and bars them from having a gun. Gun rights can be restored for those convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence 5 years after completing their sentence if they have not been convicted of another offense. It incentivizes states to implement state crisis intervention programs. The Senate bill provides $700 million for the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program for states to create crisis intervention programs. Under the measure, state crisis intervention court proceedings and related programs include mental health courts, drug courts, veterans courts, extreme risk protection order programs, which must include pre-deprivation and post-deprivation due process rights that prevent any violation or infringement of the Constitution, and the right to be represented by counsel. It improves mental health services for children and families. It requires Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to give guidance to states on improving access to telehealth for services covered under Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program. It also strengthens oversight of state implementation of requirements for early and periodic screening, diagnostic and treatment services under Medicaid. Additionally, the bill boosts access to mental health services in schools through guidance to state Medicaid agencies, local education agencies, and school based entities to support the delivery of medical assistance to Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries in a school based setting, in part through the creation of a technical assistance center. Let's see. It provides $15 billion in federal funding to bolster mental health services and trainings, including $60 million for primary care training and enhancements to provide mental and behavioral health care and training for pediatricians and other primary care physicians working with young populations. $80 million for pediatric mental health care access, $250 million for enhanced comprehensive community health services, $240 million for programs that boost awareness of mental health issues among school-age children and provide training for adults, $250 million for a community violence intervention and prevention initiative, $500 million for school-based mental health service grants, $1 billion for safe schools and citizenship education, $300 million for safety measures in and around schools and to provide training to students and school staff. That is what the bill basically has for all of this. There are certain things that will very likely change. There are certain things that I believe simply must change. For example, the so-called boyfriend loophole. The idea that someone can accuse someone else of some form of domestic violence when nothing more serious than an argument has occurred makes that a no-go for me. From the time that I have been characterized as toxically masculine, both I and my sons have been accused in one way, shape, or form of domestic violence. In my particular case, it didn't go anywhere because there was no domestic violence. Well, the domestic violence that I would perpetrate on, say, for example, my former wife, who, by the way, is a pathological liar. The only domestic violence we faced was when she threw a knife at me. Yeah. Yeah. So these are things that we have to talk about toxic femininity, but let's move on. So these things, these arguments and so on and so forth can turn into a domestic violence problem for somebody that now has to explain it when he wants to purchase a weapon. Also, there's a problem with these juvenile records being exposed to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, the NICS. We'll be talking about that in just a couple of moments. Is it an infringement on the Second Amendment? It most certainly is. Do they do something to try to make schools safer? Yes. But there is not enough. That's something else that has to be improved. That's the real issue here. And why these people won't do it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes. This is one of those times when you have to go ahead and send an email because apparently they're safer. And whether or not they're ever read, that depends on your senators and your representatives. But you better get going on this. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Welcome back to the Wells Report. It's good to have you here. My telephone number is 379. Make that 817 379 2172. 817 379 2172. So now we have a bill that is apparently at least going to get a vote in the Senate unless somebody decides to filibuster it and someone else decides not to sustain the filibuster. So what do we have? Well, we have a circumstance here where there are things in this bill that I don't agree with. Perhaps the most important one is the exposition of juvenile court records. The vast majority of juvenile court records in these United States are benign. The vast majority are. But the thing about it is that children make mistakes. A lot of these records should never see the light of day at all. Now, granted, there's already a way to pierce into sealed juvenile records. The U.S. military can do it during their recruiting process. And I don't know exactly where we draw the line there. But the possibility that someone would make a mistake as a disqualifier for gun purchases is disturbing to me. Further, if indeed you can go into juvenile records, how long do those juvenile records actually last? Forever? Probably. And since we've seen in, say, for example, schools and other places along that line to characterize bullying against, say, for example, some kids and not other kids, and since there's this rule out there that says that anybody fights at school are both wrong, and since schools have police departments now, just exactly how are those records going to get generated? Are they going to get abused? Yeah. And so these are the problems that we face. These are the ones that we have to do something about. So this bill is flawed right off the get-go, and it doesn't do enough to make our schools safer. $300 million is not enough. $300 million per state, that's enough, but not $300. Maybe, well, hang on a second. Let me double check this. Let me say $300 million for safety measures in and around schools. That might be what it is. I don't know whether that's for all 50 states or not. But if indeed it is for each state, that might be enough to help. What we need to do is we need to make sure those schools are safe, and they are not now. And that would be the main thrust of all of this had I had anything to do with it. Going back into juvenile records, no go for me. Sorry. The boyfriend loophole? Well, there are too many, and I'll just make this plain. There are too many females out there that'll accuse their significant others, their male significant others, of domestic abuse when nothing has happened. What about that? The only thing I can tell my sons, I have 4 sons, all of legal age. All I can tell them is that if you're standing there in your house and cross words are spoken, get out. Get out. Write it down on a piece of paper. My girlfriend started yelling at me about something. I tried to explain whatever it was. She kept yelling. I left the house. And note the time and the date. These are problems that these United States face every single day. Can you get people to stop misaccusing people of domestic abuse where none exists? No. No, you can't. Because it works. What happens if you cross the line of, say, for example, sexual harassment? Is that covered in this bill? Yeah, we got problems. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being here with us today. So, a procedural hurdle for a flawed gun protection bill that is making its way through the Senate, and there is bipartisan support for it. Both the majority leader of the Senate and the minority leader of the Senate, both Democrats, are willing to get behind this thing. The vote was 64-34 to advance an 80-page gun safety bill to respond to the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas. The Senate voted to proceed to the bill just more than an hour after negotiations unveiled the text, giving lawmakers little time to digest the details. The bill had strong momentum after a group of 10 Republican senators led by Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who, by the way, has an A-plus rating from the NRA, earlier this month signed a bipartisan framework of principles with 10 Democrats. So here are the 14 Republicans who voted yes. Senator John Cornyn, Senator Tom Tillis. Tillis made up the core negotiating group along with Cornyn and Democrat Senator Chris Murphy. He was initially seen as skeptical toward gun safety legislation. However, Cornyn and McConnell brought him into the talks. He turned out to be a valuable asset. He's viewed as a good political barometer of the Republican Party, and his support for the framework encouraged others. He also has an A NRA rating. Senator Susan Collins, one of the principal deal makers in the Senate, she attended the first meeting in Murphy's Hideaway in late May. Collins was particularly active in the talks to combat illegal straw purchases and firearms trafficking. She has a B rating from the NRA. Senator Lindsey Graham. Graham co-sponsored legislation with Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut to amend the federal criminal code to authorize and establish procedures for a family member of or law enforcement to request a court order to take away firearms from someone judged to pose a risk to himself or others. The problem with all that, of course, is the federal judiciary is political, and we have yet to break the seal on electing our federal judges. This is something that must change. We, the people, since these judges are absolutely willing to legislate from the bench, need to be politicians. Fine. This is the way we do this in Texas. And it will work perfectly for the United States. By the way, while we're at it, let's go ahead and add a 12-year term for Supreme Court justices. And let's add a national referendum to be able to overturn a Supreme Court decision if, say, for example, 2/3 of the American people think that's a good idea. All of these things require negotiation, but let's just keep rolling. Senator Bill Cassidy worked on the mental health component of the gun safety bill, participated in the first bipartisan discussion. He has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Roy Blunt, chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee, close ally of McConnell's, not as moderate as other Republicans who signed on. He, by the way, is retiring. He has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Richard Burr is a McConnell loyalist who is retiring from Congress at the end of the year. That's all you need to know. He has an A-plus rating from the NRA. Mitt Romney has emerged with Collins and Senator Lisa Murkowski, both rhinos, or all three rhinos, as the three most likely rhinos swing votes in the Congress. He voted twice to convict President Trump on impeachment charges. He has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, one of 10 Republican senators who endorsed the June framework along with 10 Democrats, an advisor to McConnell's leadership team, will retire from Congress at the end of the year. Enough said. He has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, one of the 4 surprise Republican votes for proceeding with the gun safety bill Tuesday evening. She did not endorse the June framework. When asked about it, she would have to review the details of the legislative text. Capito is an advisor to McConnell's leadership team, and her home state colleague, Senator Joe Manchin, was an early participant in bipartisan discussions. Capito has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Joni Ernst, the Republican from Iowa, did not endorse the bipartisan framework and was first unveiled this month. Also said she wanted to review the legislative text before making a decision. She is a member of McConnell's leadership team as the vice chairwoman of the Senate Republican Congress, or conference rather. She has an A rating from the NRA. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. She was viewed as a mystery vote heading into the floor consideration of the gun safety bill. She deflected reporter questions about the various gun safety proposals in recent weeks, saying she was focused on other issues. She played a leading role in negotiating last year's $1 trillion infrastructure bill, isn't afraid to break with the majority of her conference on big votes. She has an A rating from the NRA. Senator Todd Young of Indiana. Young was one of the biggest surprises to emerge on Tuesday after he voted to proceed with the legislation. He's a former member of McConnell's elected leadership team as someone who chaired the National Republican Senatorial Committee in 2019 and 2020. He has a pragmatic streak, knows that showing independent voters and suburban women two likely electoral blocks, the Republicans know how to govern in good politics in general elections. He's a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, has an A-plus rating from the NRA. Those are the voters. Those are the Republicans who voted. Now, we should talk a little bit about Senator John Cornyn. Senator John Cornyn and I have spoken at length many times on this broadcast. He is caught between his A-plus NRA rating and a nation reeling from shootings, according to the Texas Tribune, which is a leftist paper. The bipartisan gun legislation could end up being a career definer or career killer for John Cornyn, who must have known. Here's the copy. In late May, Senator Kyrsten Sinema just finished speaking to a group of reporters about the gut-wrenching shooting at Uvalde Elementary School. She beelined to the Senate chamber, where she ran into Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. I said to him, "Who should I talk to?" The Arizona Democrat told the Texas Tribune in an interview. McConnell directed her to his de facto deputy, John Cornyn, a Republican who touts an A-plus rating with the National Rifle Association and represents the state with more guns than any other in the nation. Still on the Senate floor, Sinema texted Cornyn, who was on a plane returning from Uvalde, where he and other state officials were dealing with the devastating aftermath of the May 24th massacre. "Mitch says to talk to you," said Senator Cornyn. "Let's get going," said Senator Sinema. "Let's get going." The two senators met for breakfast the next morning and got to work. 3 weeks later, Cornyn was the lead Republican of a group of 20 senators unveiling the framework for the landmark bipartisan gun legislation that, among other things, would attempt to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people by incentivizing red flag laws and closing the boyfriend loophole while increasing scrutiny for gun buyers under the age of 21. By the way, men, if you have a girlfriend and there's been volatility between you and the relationship as it currently is set, do it now. That's my advice. Because you are one fight away from being disqualified from purchasing a weapon if this passes and the relationship. And by the way, do not cohabitate. Do not do any of these things until you are engaged. Until you know that you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to be disqualified because your girlfriend has a temper tantrum. Same thing with women, by the way. If you're in a situation, do not move in with a guy. Men, don't allow women to move in with you. Because if there is consensual activity in that domicile, well, you are courting disaster. This is something you need to keep in mind. You know those ancient virtues about not getting together before you get married and all that? You know, there's wisdom in all that. Maybe we should get back to it, men. Maybe we should. Maybe we should. Getting back to Cornyn. If it passes as proposed, Joe Biden said it would be the most significant gun safety legislation to pass Congress in decades. It also means that Cornyn's legacy could be tied to such an effort. It will be, certainly here in Texas. So what can we surmise from this move by Senator John Cornyn, who is clearly one of the most sure-footed politicians I've ever known? Don't get me wrong. I think John Cornyn is a good man. So why is he doing this? I'll tell you why. Because he's going to retire. That's why. This is his last term. He's going to retire. which gets back to something else I say about politics in Washington, D.C. There's only one thing more dangerous in Washington, D.C. than a politician, and that's a lame duck politician. John Cornyn's going to retire. He's got 4 more years. He has 4 more years as a senator for the state of Texas. Therefore, he's untouchable. And that is why this gun bill is moving forward, because he is the prime motivator behind it. There are problems with this. There are problems with this bill. I want to see, if there's going to be legislation, it should be school safety legislation. We should have safe schools. They are not safe. And I'm talking about honest-to-goodness infrastructure safe. Do I believe we need a TSA checkpoint outside every single school? Probably not. We need something that's closer than where we are. We have to stop sticking our heads in the sand, and we have to say those teachers who are willing to defend their students should be allowed to defend their students with training and continuing education. And they should be able to end this before the police officers even show up. Somebody shows up with a weapon that's unauthorized in a school someplace, he should take about 3 steps, and he should fall on his face after he's been shot. By the way, this has happened. Happened in Alabama a couple of weeks ago. Let's see what we have here. We have some dissenting viewpoints on the chat. Let me get back to this. Hold on. I'm going backwards. Let's see. Here we go. This is someone from Kane Atisto. Kane, you can call me, by the way, at 817-379-2172. Okay, you can call me, 817-379-2172. So Kane says this: all Republicans are getting paid from the NRA and doesn't care if American citizens are getting killed from gun violence. Okay, Kane, talk to me about Chicago. The NRA shouldn't dictate legislation. Should Planned Parenthood dictate legislation? Should teachers' union dictate legislation? Okay, that was from Isaac. Let's see who else. 85 to 90% of Americans favor gun reforms, including extensive background checks. According to what? According to polling? The same polling that talked about how Donald Trump's approval ratings were in the dumper, and how the approval ratings for President Biden are probably inflated. Those polls. Let's see who else. Let's see. Kane Atisto. Cleo Marchese, I'm a Republican. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I believe in gun control. There is no Second Amendment with gun control, Kane. Those are mutually exclusive. That's all there is to it. Let's see. Mikey, Troll Patrol, you're not a troll. You're Mike Flem. Whatever. Okay, let's see who else. Kane. John Wells doesn't care if American citizens, school students, and teachers are being killed from gun violence because they're not their family members being killed. Kane, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. In this conversation alone, I have told you the problem is that schools are not safe. They're not safe for students. They're not safe for teachers. This legislation should make it absolutely abundantly safe for kids to go to school, period. And by the way, the legislation doesn't. That is a problem. Yeah, I do care. I do care vehemently that kids be safe in schools. And by the way, you say you're a Republican, but I doubt it. All I can tell you is this. Joe Biden passed a law that made it illegal for anyone to bring a weapon within 200 yards of a school. How's that working? That's gun control law. It doesn't work. We need infrastructure in the schools to make them safe so that kids and teachers are safe. Typical Republican bringing up other states. What do I mean bringing up other states? What are you talking about? Let's see what else. Why are you crying about the new law? Well, first of all, it's not a new law. And second of all, it's flawed. It's flawed. What flaws do you see in it, Kane? See, this is the way, this is part and parcel of what we do on the Wells Report. I report news, analysis for fact. Then what I do is I make commentary and we debate the commentary. Kane's doing his job. Isaac is doing his job. Debating. And that's what this is for. We have a telephone number to do it too. It's 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Interactive news. What a concept. It's the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. We're actually having a nice debate regarding the Senate bipartisan School Safety Act or the Safer Communities Act that just crossed a political hurdle to be considered by the Senate. Okay? And Kane Atisto is one of the guys who is arguing with me. He says each state has their own gun laws. Nothing is working. Correct. So why are we continuing to pass gun laws? So you kind of blew your own argument right in the weeds. Nothing. Gun laws don't work. If gun laws worked, then why don't they work? It's a very simple question. What do we have to do? We have to take guns out of the conversation. If schools are safe against guns, then guns drop out of the conversation. Why aren't we actually why aren't we giving ourselves safe schools? The answer is we're not. What are we doing? In other words, another political mess over something that has nothing to do with reality. What's wrong with having one gun law for every state, not different laws? Well, I'll tell you, Kane, once again, this country is called the United States of America, not the Federal Republic of America. The states make their own laws. That's baked in the cake. The United States of America, not the Federal Republic of America. That's why there isn't one law. There shouldn't be one law. That's why one law is a mistake. Because what you end up with is this one-size-fits-all garbage that doesn't work. Just like the Gun-Free Safe School Zone Act. It doesn't work. By the way, I misreported that. I said 200 yards. It's actually 1,000 feet. It's actually 1,000 feet. And people said, well, Joe Biden didn't actually introduce that part. Well, no, it was part of the 1990 crime bill. The one he keeps taking credit for? Done. Okay? Gun-free zones of any kind anywhere are dangerous. They are dangerous. What they are is an opportunity. What they are is an opportunity to create a soft target for a maniac. The only people that follow those laws are law-abiding citizens. That is a no-go. That's a no-go. So you have to stop it. So what are we stopping? We're stopping infringements on the Second Amendment of the Constitution. That's what we're stopping. Everybody says, the people of the United States say in some 80 percentile that they want common sense gun laws. There is no common sense. Everything has been twisted and wadded up in such a mess that common sense is gone. Absolutely gone. I'm sorry, Isaac, you say that open carry has led to increases in homicide and road rage. You're going to have to cite your source on that, man. I'm sorry. You're smart. Why was the Second Amendment put in the United States Constitution? Kane, I'll tell you why. To protect us against an oppressive and tyrannical government. That's it. That's why the Second Amendment was in there. That's why we have it. Look at what happens when there isn't a Second Amendment. Look at what happens in Australia. People are being thrown on the ground and beaten by police officers for not getting an inoculation. Now, am I saying that when somebody wants to give force you to get a shot, you should take out a weapon and shoot them? No. But I guarantee you no police officer is going to drag someone to an inoculation clinic to get a COVID shot if it's possible that they can get a shot of a different kind. Because what goes with the Second Amendment is not just the right to be able to defend yourself from an oppressive government. It sets a tone. It reinforces the fact that people in the United States are individuals with individual rights that can be used as they see fit. There you go. Canada, New Zealand, Australia. It's a mess. It's a mess. That's why, Kane. Good question. Good question. We can come together. We can reason together. Just because somebody argues doesn't mean that You just answered my question because when it was written, there was only one rule for every state. Yeah, that everybody be able. It's a right. It's not a rule. It's a right. All you need to do is know the difference between just between you and me, Kane. Know the difference between laws, regulations, and rights. They're different. They're all different. As a matter of fact, it was up to me, regulations and laws. All regulations would be passed by Congress and thus be laws, because probably half or three-quarters of those regulations would never get through Congress, right? You're listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of it. Back with more coming up in just a moment. Hey, Kane, thanks very much. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you taking part. You too, Isaac. It's always good as long as you don't troll, okay? That's all I'm asking.
15 hours.
North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Welcome. Glad you're here. We bring you the news. We bring you analysis for fact. We bring you commentary. We bring you debate. As you just heard last hour, if you missed last hour, make sure you download it and make sure you check it out. Okay? We just had a really nice debate regarding the new senatorial gun bill. Kane Atisto jumped into the chat room and started talking. And just sent me a note saying, John Wells, you gave me good information. Thank you, sir. You're certainly welcome, Kane. See, that's what we do here. What we do here is we actually come up with solutions. We speak together. We have conversations that the people in Washington, D.C. don't want us to have. We actually talk about the news. This is not a right-wing broadcast. Unless you think the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Federalist that explained all the things they did with those founding documents is wrong. If that makes me right-wing, what does that tell you about the left wing? What does that tell you about people that argue against the Constitution? It tells you that they are un-American. That's what it tells you. How do we get those un-American people making so many important decisions about our nation? Well, we elect the right people. Who are they? Politicians? I don't think so. Politicians currently in place in Washington, D.C. have spent $28.8 trillion more than they have. That's incompetence. People that actually know about what it means to put their name on the front page, on the front of a paycheck instead of a back page or the backside. Those are the people that need to be in Washington. Those are not politicians. Name one politician who doesn't lie. Well, George Washington. I mean, it depends on your point of view. And that's interesting too, Kane, because what has happened is that the actual laws of lying have become redefined based on politics. A politician or the news media that says, "Oh, Donald Trump was lying," or President Joe Biden was lying. Well, okay. If they're lies and demonstrable lies, then they're lies. But if it's a disagreement based on a point of view, that's not a lie, that's a disagreement. I didn't call you a liar when you brought up some things that were wrong. You said that I don't care about kids getting shot in schools because I don't have kids in schools. Baloney. So there you go. Name one human being who does not lie. I voted for 40 years. They all lie about something. Well, then why are we electing them, Kane? Why are we electing these people? Let's elect people who don't lie as a matter of national policy. Let's do that. Let's start electing each other. Politicians elect each other. Some guys who's running and is a creature of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or whatever party that gets a, say, for example, a monetary donation from somebody already in Washington. Those are politicians electing each other. Let's elect ourselves. There are 330 million of us. There's only about 1,000 of them. Okay? Let's do this right. Speaking of electing the right people, from USA Today, from the reliably blue nation's capital to rural red Alabama, voters made choices in the Tuesday primaries yesterday that will essentially decide November elections. They chose several women. A contentious mayoral primary determined who is likely to lead Washington, D.C. during an increase in violent crime. Former President Donald Trump's endorsement in a Senate race proved likely inconsequential in Alabama. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what this is called. Now, remember, USA Today is biased. 2 congressional races in Virginia determine who will face Representatives Elaine Luria and Abigail Spanberger. 2 of the most vulnerable House races for Democrats. A Georgia Secretary of State race shows Democrats are still fighting against incumbent Brad Raffensperger, despite the firewall he put up to Trump's pressure to overturn the 2020 election. Once again, this is about interpretation. Okay? Trump will likely take credit for Katie Britt's Senate victory in Alabama, but make no mistake, this was a win for the state's Republican establishment. Okay. Yeah, this is USA Today doing their absolute dead level best to minimize Donald Trump. Donald Trump got 74, like him, hate him, it doesn't make any difference. The facts are as follows. Donald Trump got 74 million votes in his run for a second term. 74 million. More votes cast for a sitting president ever, and still managed to lose the election somehow. But he did get 74 million votes. The Republican Party did what every other politician does. They did not believe that the people of the United States fired the political process with the election of Donald Trump. Republicans, Democrats, they all believe, oh, it can't be us. No, it can't be we the politicians. No. It's a fluke. And he doesn't really have that much power. Yeah, he has a lot of power. Should he have it? That's a matter of opinion. But he has it. And the Republican Party needs to start waking up. By the way, they have no excuse. I took part in a congressional conclave. A representative asked me to talk to that particular group of people. It was classified. I'm not telling you anything more about it. I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not telling you who. I'm not telling you when. It just happened. And I told them in that conference, I said that if the Republican Party does not, and this was, I'll tell you, it was almost 10 years ago. Okay? I said that if the Republican Party doesn't do the people's business, a populist will rush by them like they were standing still. That was a precursor to Donald Trump, and that is exactly what happened. And now what they're trying to do is minimize the guy. Donald Trump's presidency was sabotaged by both political parties, which shows the contempt that both political parties have for the voters of the United States. That's the takeaway. Like it, don't like it, Donald Trump got elected in 2016. The people of the United States spoke. And by the way, I've defended President Obama. He was elected twice. I talked about the great wisdom of the American people. I talked about how Thomas Jefferson got it right. Only the people of the United States know who the president should be. I talked about all these things years and years ago. I've been right on top of this from the get-go. And I'm right on top of it now. Do not elect politicians. Elect your neighbors. The mainstream media has abandoned the truth and chosen sides. That's why you're here. You're watching this broadcast because you're not getting the news. The free press enshrined in the Constitution of the United States through the Bill of Rights does not exist. It does not exist. Their politicians called another name. And so I will tell you that when you start electing a neighbor and this starts catching fire across the nation, that suddenly your neighbor is going to be a chainsaw murderer from Arkansas, when he was a high school kid. Well, okay, so he's a chainsaw murderer. Who did he murder? Trees. What? It was murder. So says the mainstream media. You're going to have to ignore those people. Well, what if we elect a monster? Well, that means you didn't know who you were electing, as if the monsters in Washington, D.C. aren't monsters. $28.8 trillion in debt, a government that operates in spite of the people instead of in favor of the people of the United States. We're already there. I'm telling you. You heard it here first. Republican Party has no excuse. None. The Democrat Party has no excuse. They allowed the left wing, the crazy radical leftists, communists, socialists, to not just invade, but overtake their party. It didn't take much of a nudge. I mean, Nancy Pelosi already there. Chuck Schumer standing on the steps of the Supreme Court, threatening Supreme Court justices. He's already there. Didn't take much of a nudge for a lot of these people because all they can see is unbridled power. That unbridled power called to heel by the Constitution of the United States. We the people is how the Constitution starts, not we the politicians. So getting back to the primaries, Katie Britt had a Senate victory in Alabama. She's replacing Senator Richard Shelby, whose retirement opened the seat in the first place. She served as chief executive for the Business Council of Alabama. Both Shelby and the council helped Britt's candidacy. In other words, politicians electing politicians. Even at the time President Trump endorsed Mo Brooks, he withdrew that endorsement and then said, hey, Katie Britt's the right guy. Okay, that's a generic term. Okay. So did Trump switch horses in midstream? Maybe. But Mo Brooks ran as a Trump supporter. Trump switched his endorsement. Mo Brooks lost the primary. Talk about that political power. Well, there you go. The Bowser win in Washington, D.C. was a loss for progressives. Yeah, okay. So once again, that's creative license when it comes to, quote, journalism, unquote, by USA Today. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is a crazy woman. She was renominated for a third term for the first time ever, despite headwinds of increased crime in the nation's capital and 2 Democrat challengers from the city council. Her win is another ding against progressives, sort of. I think she's a progressive. I think she just hasn't been found out yet. But what I will tell you is I will tell you that that was another win. Okay, we'll talk more about that coming up in just a couple of moments. You are listening to the Wells Report. You're watching it too. I know. I'm working on a face transplant. I had a bicycle accident a while back and smashed my nose into fragments. And the plastic surgeon who fixed it did a flamingly wonderful job. I'm going to go see him and see what he can do about turning my face into something that belongs on television. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's possible. He'll say I'm a plastic surgeon, not a miracle worker. I get it. I understand it. I'll do the best I can with what I have to work with. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for being here today. We're talking about the primaries yesterday in Alabama, Virginia. There were. I'm throwing them all together. Some were primaries, Washington D.C., Virginia. Some were runoff elections. Brad Raffensperger moving to Georgia. The Republican incumbent Secretary of State pushed back against the former President Trump's attempts to get him to re-look at the Georgia elections. Throughout the hearings, what's being said is the Democrats are taking the fight to Raffensperger in Georgia. This is USA Today copy. Democrats in Georgia are working hard to replace him. Democrat primary voters chose State Representative B. Wynn as the Democrat nominee to take Raffensperger's place in November. Wynn ran on a platform of debunking false narratives, claiming Raffensperger supported sweeping election overhauls passed last year by Republican state lawmakers. When our voting rights are attacked, we all lose. Well, the problem with all that is that that's the rhetoric that came out of Georgia leftists after the Georgia elections of 2020. The problem with all that is that the subsequent elections overwhelmed all of this negativity about how it was voter suppression. More people voted in the primaries than ever had before, and than voted in the 2020 election in Georgia. So I'm sorry, records were set. That's just the way that works. Okay. Virginia races, big battlegrounds for Democrats. Tuesday's results set up two of the most interesting races of the fall. Two moderate Virginia Democrats struggling to hold on to their seats. Elaine Luria, Abigail Spanberger are two of the most vulnerable House seats. The Republican primary determined who will face them. Luria will face State Senator Jen Kiggins. Spanberger will face Prince William County Board Supervisor Leslie Vega, or Yesley Vega, sorry. Republicans are hoping to pick up the two seats, which could help determine the party that controls Congress next year and the fate of Joe Biden's agenda. As if it was Joe Biden's agenda. Conservatives and some political analysts have been warning of a red wave in competitive districts like Luria and Spanberger represent. Where Trump lost in 2020, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin won in 2021. Democrats have acknowledged the political headwinds against them, especially in the economy, but Speaker Nancy Pelosi said her party has no intention of losing the House. Okay. Which, by the way, takes us right back to electioneering. Okay? Once again, I'm not saying that there was fraud. I'm not saying anything about the 2020 election except a couple of things. Too many people voted. 165 million registered voters. And let's see, 81 million plus 74 million is 155 million people voted. That's 10,000 more than the registered voters. Or actually, what that works out to is a 95% turnout. That didn't happen. It's never happened. It never will happen. That's thing number one. Thing number two, voting machines were used. And none of us know how they work. Dominion voting machines were used. Dominion will not tell us how they work. That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem. You don't know how the voting machines work and they won't tell you? Fine, your contract's canceled. We get to know how the voting machines work. And that we don't know how the voting machines work means that there is absolutely no way to determine the veracity of any of our elections until those Dominion machines until they come clean with how those machines operate, or until we just cancel them as not being usable because their operating system is a secret. Then we don't know what's going on with our elections. We just don't. So that's my problem with the 2020 election. What are yours? You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is The Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for being here today. This is a little off the topic, but it's essential that you learn what I learned today. Iran, since 1979, has been picking fights with the United States of America. Started with the Iranian hostage crisis. And they have essentially been a thorn in the side of this nation since. They keep doing their best to goad the American military and America in general into a fight. I know why. Because the government wants their people to realize, or to at least believe, that they are equal to the United States and can handle anything the United States can throw at them. I can only offer one word, and that is Iraq. 2 wars with that country, and we destroyed them in about 2.5 weeks. If you add both wars together, how long it took for the American military to take out Iraq. Iran will face that very same thing, and they took another step toward trying to make that happen. Benjamin Netanyahu, by the way, called Iran the world's first suicide country. He's not far wrong. Listen to this. As reported by Fox News, Iran is threatening possible assassination attempts on former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Hang on just a minute. Somebody's calling me on the telephone. Hey, it's the Wells Report. What's going on? Hello?
Hi, I'm calling to speak with Kathleen.
Kathleen doesn't live here.
Oh, sorry about that. Thanks for your time. Have a great.
Pardon? Excuse me? What'd you say? Okay. Wrong number, but at least somebody called. Iran is threatening a possible assassination attempt on former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. This, according to a couple of high-profile accounts, one of them from the Iranian government. Pompeo has been highly critical of Iran while serving in the Trump administration, and afterwards he was in office when U.S. forces killed Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani, whose daughter is now threatening the former Secretary of State. Normally that wouldn't be any big deal, but then the threat was repeated by an Iranian Twitter account. Zainab Soleimani said Pompeo whines about Iran on Saudi TV, home of the 9/11 plotters, and then adds, "Live in fear, liar." The tweet included an image depicting Pompeo in a cage. When the Iranian government retweeted it, they pictured an image of Pompeo with crosshairs on his head and flames coming from below. That's good enough for me. The only thing I can tell you is this. Iran needs to keep something in mind. Iran, if they assassinate a former Secretary of State, things will disappear in that state, in that nation, like the government. There's not an American walking around on the soil of this nation that would countenance Iran assassinating anybody. By the way, not just Mike Pompeo. Okay. There is someone else that's also been threatened, and a former Trump operative is also being threatened. You're not gonna kill our government people. And I know they say, well, you killed one of our government people. Sure. Yeah, he's a terrorist who killed a bunch of American military members. Yeah, he had to go and he went. That's something that Iran needs to understand. You don't have a chance. You do not have a chance. You need to stop messing with us. I like Iranians. I do. Iranians are fun. Iranians take shots at us that are funny. Like, for example, when we had trouble keeping the lights in New York on, for example, they said, "Oh, look at the great United States, can't keep the lights on." I thought that was funny. It was also very true. So for all that being said and done, Don't do it. Don't do it. Some old business, by the way. Let's see. What do we have here? Fox just lost a dismissal case against Dominion. Yeah, but once again, yeah, go ahead forward with that lawsuit. As a part of discovery, we'll have to find out how Dominion voting machines work. And that's really all I'm interested in the first place. Dominion voting systems will be reimbursed by Rudy, Sydney, Fox, OAN, and Newsmax for slander and defamation. As long as their operating systems are secret, they haven't been defamed at all. Not a bit. That's not the way it works. Okay, so a little old business. Let's move on. The mainstream media, as I was describing in the last hour of the Wells Report, has abandoned the truth and chosen sides. Their cause celeb right now is the possible overturning of Roe v. Wade. And instead of reporting the truth about Roe v. Wade, they're trying to whip up concern that women in the United States will somehow not be able to get an abortion when they want one. Okay? Now, you can have several different opinions as to whether a woman should have access to free and easy abortion anytime she wants or not. That's not what we're discussing here. We're discussing the Supreme Court of the United States undoing a mistake they themselves made. But that's not what's being reported. Let me give you an example of this errant, even misleading, quote, journalism, unquote, from USA Today. The U.S. Supreme Court is poised to force women seeking abortions to navigate a labyrinth of laws and restrictions ranging from near outright bans in more than a dozen states to provisions in a few states not only guaranteeing them access but funding the pay for them. If a decision is made to eliminate federal abortion rights, which, by the way, Roe v. Wade did not establish, within a year, many as 75,000 women won't make it to a provider, according to one estimate. 75,000 women who won't make it to a provider. They would be forced to give birth instead, marking just the start of the fallout from a ruling whose implications would stretch far beyond reproductive health care to encompass suppression of female participation in the workforce and amplification of racial and economic inequities. Now let's talk about the reality. The reality is that Roe v. Wade circumvented the process to amend the Constitution of the United States. No one challenged it until now. If you want a right to abortion, pass an amendment to the Constitution of the United States. You don't even have to go that far. We've already seen states make their own law. Has anybody decided to set those laws aside? No. Will the overturning of Roe v. Wade set those laws aside? No. What they will do is what politicians around the country absolutely dread the most. It will force them to go on the record about abortion in their states. Which, by the way, is what they get paid to do. They get paid to make those calls. They get paid to have those debates. They get paid to cast those votes. They get paid to be put on the record. That's all that's happening here. That's all that's happening here. What you must do if you want these things to be enshrined as rights in the Constitution of the United States is pass an amendment. But you see, nobody will do it. Why? Because the entire issue has been mangled from the start by politicians and a mainstream media playing politics. This is a blight on the Supreme Court of the United States. It always has been. Okay, so once again, here's what's going on. If a decision is made to eliminate federal abortion rights, there are no federal abortion rights in the first place. Within a year, as many as 75,000 women won't make it to a provider. 75,000 women. 75,000 women. we're going to upend the Constitution and the amendment process for 75,000 women. Really? I wonder if we'd be doing anything if, say, for example, 75,000 conservatives wouldn't be able to do something or another in the nation. The answer is no. Nobody would care. In other words, the arguments against the overturning of Roe v. Wade, first of all, are essential lies, in my opinion. And further, it exposes hypocrisy, and it exposes the wrong story. The correct story is that you cannot pass a constitutional amendment in a courtroom. You have to do it in a legislature. And you have to do it in 2/3 of the legislatures around the country. Get the amendment written, get it considered, get it voted on, get it ratified. But no politician is going to come within 50 feet of something like that, ever. Because they don't want to be on the record. And that's why there's a problem. Solve this problem anytime we wanted to. All we have to do is decide when life begins legally in the United States. It's all we have to do. We know when life ends. It's when your heart stops. Not when your brain quits. It's when your heart stops. So when does life begin? No one knows. No one knows. Sure, there are people sitting in prison now for double murders involving killing a pregnant woman who died at their hands of this heinous murdering act. And they counted the baby too. Well, okay, how far along was the baby? So people say, no, life begins at conception. Okay. Is that legal? No. Some people say life begins when the heart starts, which makes sense to me. Your life ends when your heart stops. Your life begins when the heart starts. That gives you 8 weeks. It gives you 8 weeks. Pregnancy tests are so good right now, you can find out after 3 weeks or less. This is not a problem. And also, by the way, the easiest way in the world to not have to worry about getting an abortion is to not get pregnant in the first place. We have technology for that too, that appeared at about the same time Roe v. Wade appeared. This is not a problem. But here we are with this ridiculous article in USA Today saying women would be forced to give birth instead. Yeah. It would stretch, this decision would stretch far beyond reproductive health and encompass suppression of female participation in the workforce. I'm sorry, did we not just pass a law that talks about family leave? That's not a problem. Amplification of racial and economic inequities. Let me tell you about the amplification of racial and economic inequities. Since Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood has committed 550 million abortions. No, that's not true. 55 million. There we go. Sorry. 55 million abortions in black communities. Just black communities. 55 million. If you take away the mortality rates, et cetera, you take away people getting killed, we're missing about 50 million black people in the United States just because of Planned Parenthood. Would you call that a racial and economic inequity? I sure as hell would. And oh, by the way, Planned Parenthood gets money from the government. Case closed. Case closed. That's the difference between journalism and truth, by the way. You get the latter here. I don't know what you get in the mainstream media, except garbage like this. They say, my God, you're going to have a maze of different laws that people have to figure out. Yeah, sort of like driver's license laws. Yeah. Sort of like teacher's credentials. Yeah, they're all different. What else? Well, there's so many things that are different. We're the United States of America. We're not the Federal Republic of America. The states get to make their own decisions. What are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about dishonesty. And since most of this dishonesty comes from the left, I dare say that leftist politics cannot exist honestly. You have to be deceptive. You have to lie. Leftist politics relies on dishonesty. And that's not what journalism is supposed to be. This is the Wells Report. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We got a call just a second ago. Yeah, a call poured in. It was from a telemarketer trying to get in touch with somebody who had the phone number before. Truly annoying. Hey, we are discussing the news. We give you news, analysis for fact, commentary, and debate. We talk about truth. We have seen through Roe v. Wade and the possible overturning of it, which should happen any time if indeed what we've heard so far is true. what we've seen is we've seen a spasm of leftist scare you to death journalism, unquote, journalism, unquote. And we've also seen people threaten the Supreme Court itself with court packing and all manner of other things. Now listen to this. There are a lot of ways to attack things in the United States. Here comes another one for the Supreme Court. Hundreds of judges across the United States and U.S. Supreme Court justices, U.S. Supreme Court justices, should be bound by a code of ethics. Many said they were shocked to find out that wasn't already the case. The National Judicial College surveyed judges across the nation on whether the Supreme Court should be held to a higher standard. The survey came amid a contentious and high-profile U.S. Supreme Court calendar that has involved questions of bias as well as investigations into Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's family ties to the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. The Supreme Court is expected to announce more than a dozen decisions in the next few weeks. Abortion, guns, immigration, environment. Majority of Americans, 55%, say they disapprove of the job the highest court is doing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to get a code of ethics. Okay, well, who's going to determine if the code of ethics is violated? That would be politicians, ably assisted by a biased mainstream media. So in other words, if you don't like a decision, say for example, a justice makes, well, suddenly they're going to be under the gaze of someone looking at their ethics. Like this one, for example. Investigations into Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's family ties to the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. In other words, they blow their own argument out of the water simply by bringing up that. Was that an ethical violation? No, because Clarence Thomas isn't bound by an ethics code for Supreme Court justices. There's no one to arbitrate it. Who are you going to get to arbitrate it? Politicians? It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. That's why there is no code of ethics. The code of ethics of the Supreme Court rests solely with the justices of the Supreme Court, as it should be. Well, where's the check and balance? What if you get a crazy person in there? Well, that's what that Senate confirmation stuff is all about. That's what it's all about. So when the Senate confirmation process is poisoned with politics, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, when that stuff gets poisoned with politics, that's why there is no ethics code. It's very much like the President of the United States. He would be constantly being bombarded with all manner of charges were it not for the fact that he has executive immunity in a lot of different ways. That is to protect the president against the political process. And that only works when a political party is willing to exert political pressure on another political party that keeps trying to impeach their president, which happened to Donald Trump because the Republican Party didn't want Donald Trump in power either. And once again, casting aspersions on and making abundant contempt for the voters of the United States obvious on both political parties. Outrageous. So yeah, let's put a code of ethics out there. Yeah, let's put a code of ethics out there for the Supreme Court so that whenever somebody has a problem with the Supreme Court justice's decision, they can just remove them. No, we're not doing that. But you see how the attacks can come? That's why the judiciary is a lifetime appointment, so that they can be above this stuff. Does it work? In the main, yes, it does. Although the federal judiciary is political. Hell, the Supreme Court itself is political. That's why we have a liberal wing of the Supreme Court and a conservative wing of the Supreme Court. Is that a good thing? No. I was talking about a 12-year term for Supreme Court justices. No, it's got to be 24. I rethought that. It's got to be 24 years. And so we should, if we are in a position where we are beset with a political judicial system, political judicial appointees, yeah, there should be term limits. Yeah, that's what should happen. They should be elected. That's what national elections are all about. There you go. You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Thanks very much for being here with us. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for being here. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, the real news. We bring you analysis for fact. Not a lot of fact in the news today. Okay? Not a lot of fact. There's some. That's what we report. We draw the contrast between the news and the facts. Something you have to do more now than ever before in our nation's history. Because the mainstream media has abandoned the truth and chosen sides. That is not a free press as enshrined in the Constitution through the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment. So what do? Well, what I decided to do was I decided that I was going to report the news. Yeah, there's opinion. I do commentary as well. The check and balance on the commentary, debate. So news, analysis for fact, commentary, and debate. That is what we do on the Wells Report. The people of the United States in 2020 elected Joe Biden. Joe Biden is our president, and as best I can, I support the president in every way I can think of. Right up to the point where he does things that are deleterious to the United States of America. Like, for example, destroying our energy independence for the sake of a cockamamie idea that, one, it's got two parts. The idea has two parts. One, the climate is going to kill us, which is stupid. And two, that somehow we need to be able to harvest all the energy we need without using oil, natural gas, and coal, which we have in abundance in the United States, hundreds of years worth. And oh, by the way, to call these fuels fossil fuels and to call solar energy, all this other stuff, wind energy as clean energy is bogus and stupid. It's really nonsensical and silly. But because of that, we find ourselves in a position where we're paying over $5 a gallon for gasoline. And it's not good. It's hurting the people of the United States. And we should stop doing it. But that's what votes are for. And we need to start doing a better job with those votes, in my opinion. If you have a difference of opinion, by all means, join us, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172, or go to the chat room. Vibrant chat today. Very, very good. People saying what they think. And this, by the way, is the third hour of the Wells Report. There are 2 other hours. Make sure you grab one of those when you get a chance. So, the President of the United States is a man who has served this nation for nearly half a century. He is obviously struggling. He is struggling mentally. It is something that, in my particular point of view, is cruelty against a reasonably good guy. I don't know why we allowed. Well, I do know why we did it, because that's the democratic process. Not the Democrat process, but there was a Democrat process involved, which is why I have trouble with my terms. There's a difference between democracy and democracy. Democracy is a completely different thing. And strangely enough, Democrats keep figuring that if they're wrong, it's because there's an attack on democracy, which is a misnomer on several different cases. This is a democratic republic that has nothing to do with the Democrat Party. Because we've seen the Democrats will do anything they can to be able to push their electoral agenda up to and including maybe, taking shots at the actual election process. Oh, you're going to bring up those dang Dominion machines again. No, I'm talking about how Democrats, and only Democrats, are unwilling to make it necessary to show an ID to cast a vote. That is just plain electoral miscreancy. That's all there is. And people aren't willing to believe that, or some people aren't willing to believe that, but it's just as plain as the nose on my face. And as you can see, that's pretty plain. That's pretty plain. I mean, why in heaven's name would you not want to have to show an ID to vote? It's one of the most important things an American citizen can do. Well, the reason they don't want that is because they want to be able to change the vote if necessary. And who's arguing for all of this? Democrats. I rest my case. Joe Biden being the president of the United States after gathering 81 million votes in the 2020 election. Barack Obama got 63, 65 million votes. But the real political powerhouse, as we've seen with the 2020 election, is Joe Biden. Yeah, so, Americans, when it comes right down to it, want an incredibly old, struggling, gaffe-prone man to be the president of the United States. Okay. But now what do we do? Not yet halfway through his term. And the Democrat Party, who slapped themselves on the back saying, by golly, hey, we're in a situation where we can get anybody elected. Yeah, you can. And with respect to the president of the United States, they elected an eggplant. Sorry. By the way, Isaac says the ID issues were resolved 10 years ago after attempts by Trump to overturn elections in 5 states, but you refuse to address that. Well, let's address it now, Isaac. Do you have to show an ID? Do you have to show an ID to vote in an American election? No. No, you don't. You can vote a provisional ballot in Texas because we have a voter ID law, which strangely enough hasn't been challenged anywhere. Okay? You should have to show an ID to cast a ballot. All right? You don't have to. It's ridiculous. And once again, we have a Democrat arguing with whether or not voter ID is a thing. It's not a thing. It needs to be a thing. Only registered voters should vote in American elections. I mean, we've got motor voter where you immediately, just by getting a driver's license, you are registered to vote. Fine. So what happened? All of your Democrat buddies in Democrat buddy states decided to give illegal aliens driver's licenses. Oops. Let's move on. 50 top Democrat officials interviewed by the New York Times said Joe Biden should not run for re-election in 2024. Do you agree or disagree? Should Joe Biden run for re-election? Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Or go to the chat. Should Joe Biden run for re-election in 2024? 50 top Democrats say no. Of these 50 top Democrat officials, many were pessimistic about Biden's leadership, marred with failures. His failure to pass the $1.8 trillion Build Back Better agenda and voting rights expansion bill, backlash over the chaotic exit from Afghanistan. The administration faces challenges from record high gas prices, soaring inflation, a possible end to federal abortion rights, which don't exist in the first place. By the way, this is from the London Daily Mail. I went offshore for this story because I go everywhere the news is. Democrats worry about the president's age. The oldest man appointed to office at age 78 last January. Okay, so those Democrat leaders are saying, well, Joe Biden's awfully old, but that's not really the point. The point is that age is relative to individuals. Some people that are that age have no problem whatsoever. None of those people include Joe Biden. And what are you basing that on, John? He's always been a gaffe machine. My goodness gracious. He's always been a gaffe machine. Uh-huh. That's not what I'm concerned about. You know what I'm concerned about? I'm concerned about the way he walks. I'm concerned about the way he looks now versus when he became the president. His eyes are vacant. He shuffles instead of walks. I'm pretty sure there might be some Parkinson's going on, but then again, I'm not a medical professional. So, what kind of medications is he on? John Kennedy, young, skinny. Man, he was skinny. But during his presidency, he bloated. Why? Well, because he was on cortisone for his back and testosterone as well. He was being medicated. He had Addison's disease. That perpetual suntan that everybody talked about was an actual symptom of Addison's disease. Why is that a problem? Well, because one of the symptoms of Addison's disease is flights of fancy, delusions of grandeur. Is that something you want in a president? Well, so Joe Biden is an extremist. Should he run for re-election? No. No, he shouldn't. He should clear the way. Because the Democrat Party needs to figure out who's going to run for president. And by the way, age is not the issue. Age is not the issue. Okay, because like I said, there are a lot of people that are sharp as hell and are in an advanced age. You have to take it case by case. Let me give you an example. Donald Trump is very old. Okay, he's old. But what's the difference between Donald Trump's age and Joe Biden's age? What's the difference? Do you have any idea? Donald Trump has taken cognitive testing more than once. Joe Biden hasn't. Or if he has taken cognitive testing, nobody has the results. Nobody. Why is that? I mean, when you get right down to it, I can remember the joys and wonders of sitting in my living room watching the news and getting the results from George W. Bush's colonoscopy. Oh, that's what I want to do right around dinner time. Yeah, I want to talk about the president's colonoscopy. I wanted to know, for example, that John McCain had an enlarged prostate. But do we know anything about the actual medical condition of Joe Biden's thought process? No. There's more. Should Joe Biden run for re-election? Next on the Wells Report. Welcome back to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Should Joe Biden run for re-election in 2024? If Joe Biden does not run for re-election, who would the Democrats nominate? If you're a Democrat, by all means, share your points of view. Should Joe Biden run for re-election? I don't believe so. Who would they run instead? Well, Kamala Harris. She's the vice president. Would she have a shot at running? Yeah. Would she win? No. Should Jill Biden, Joe Biden's wife, run? I'd like to hear what she had to say. But should Joe Biden run again? No. I just don't think so. Americans, for their part, are lukewarm. This from 538, the website. President Biden says he's running for election in 2024. Americans don't believe him. Moreover, many don't want him to throw his hat in the ring for a second term. Even before he was elected in 2020, there's been speculation about whether he'll seek a second term. A Wall Street Journal poll conducted from March 2nd through the 7th found that more than half of registered voters don't think he'll run again in 2024. Only 29% think he will run again. 19% were unsure. A second Biden run isn't that popular either, according to an Associated Press NORC poll conducted from January 13th through the 18th. 70% of Americans don't want the president to run in 2024. Democrats are lukewarm about the idea. A CNN SSRS poll conducted from January 10th through February 6th found that slightly more than half of registered Democrats, and Democrat-leading independents wanted a candidate other than Joe Biden. Should Joe Biden run? Other polling, and once again, polling is sketchy, okay? But I report it because it's being reported elsewhere, and you deserve to know. 33% of Americans, 33% of Americans approve of President Biden's job performance. 54% disapprove. Here's the Fox News article. President Biden's approval rating has reached the lowest level of his presidency, with a new poll showing only a third of Americans approve of his job performance. 54% disapprove. This according to the results of a Quinnipiac University poll released today. That marked ties the lowest approval Biden has received in the poll during his presidency, matching a number set in January when the president faced a 33 to 53 approval deficit. Biden's approval numbers are slightly higher among registered voters. 35% approve of the president's job performance. 55% disapprove. 94% of Republicans disapprove of the president's job performance. Should he run again? I don't believe so. I believe that what we're doing here is, I think we're abusing an old man. It's time to let Joe Biden be Joe Biden, enjoying his days on Rehoboth Beach, smoking Cuban cigars and really good scotch, and reflect on what has been, if not a brilliant political career, certainly a successful one. Who will the Democrats run? Let's talk about that next on the Wells Report. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thank you for being here. We're talking about President Joe Biden. Should he run for re-election in 2024? There are more people that say no than say yes. His approval ratings, abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. Legislative failures, runaway inflation, gasoline prices through the roof, food shortages, all of this comes to rest on the president's shoulders. You know, the president was talking about inflation again today, and he was talking about gas prices again today, and what he's proposed is a gas tax holiday. 90 days, which, by the way, would end right before the November elections. It'll save you about $3.60 a tank. That's based on a 20-gallon average. There was an idea that was put to rest by President Obama, who called it a gimmick, said it was ridiculous. A lot of other people have said the same thing because it's ridiculous. And since the inflation that we're currently dealing with is a creature of cutting supply of fuel and throwing $1.9 trillion into the economy, it would be pointless. We take 18 cents off the price of a gallon of gas, and the retailers will immediately raise the price of gas 18 cents. Further, this is another situation where the government of the United States, I believe it's somewhere around $70 billion that this would benefit. That's going to add to inflation, not do anything to stop it. Because once again, available money requires the economy to expand to grab it. Oh, they can say, my gosh, and we're going to just freeze prices. Well, you can't freeze prices. That's government control of the economy. This government is $28.8 trillion in debt. Do they need any more control of the economy than they already have? No, they do not. They absolutely don't. By the way, this ties to people that say, my God, we've got to get rid of the Fed. In favor of who? The government? Yeah, we're going to turn the control of the currency over to politicians? Uh-huh. No. By the way, the Soviet Union had control of the currency, and that government imploded. Why? Because they just dictated what the price of the ruble was going to be. Period. By political fiat. All these people worried about fiat currency. Yeah, turn it over to the politicians. Then what happens? And so we have Joe Biden. Most people want him to not run for re-election. Who would then run for re-election? I just realized something here. I made a list. Of prominent Democrats that might be vying for the Democrat nomination for president in 2024. Guess whose name I forgot to put on this? Kamala Harris. I mean, with Kamala Harris's conduct in office, she's not a serious candidate. That she is one step away or one bicycle accident away from being the president of the United States is horrifying to me. And by the way, if you are a Democrat that thinks that Kamala Harris hung the moon, by all means, call me on the telephone at 817-379-2172 and tell me why she's the perfect woman to be the president of the United States. Okay, so she has a part to play in this. Who would run for the presidency in 2024? Kamala Harris. Does she have a chance? I don't know. Only the people of the United States know who the president should be. Maybe she'll win. Joe Biden got 81 million votes. Good gracious, Kamala Harris. If that trend continues, Kamala Harris could probably win with with 97 million votes. Then somebody said, what about Michelle Obama? I don't think Michelle Obama wants to get within a million miles of the presidency. Is she powerful? Yes. Is she compromised by her socialist beliefs? Yes. I brought up the name Jill Biden. I'd like to hear what Jill Biden has to say. I would. And by the way, what about Michelle Obama and Jill Biden running as a ticket? Let's see, Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California. The current governor of California who survived a recall effort. He might be a candidate. He's young, he's vital, he's a communist. The man's a socialist. And while we're on the subject of communist socialists, there's always good old Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is old, okay? But Bernie Sanders, even though I believe his ideas are hopelessly, ridiculously dumb. I mean, here's a guy who is an avowed socialist who has never lived in a socialist country, espousing socialism while he's taking advantage of capitalism. Come on, Bernie. Once again, this idea of Bernie Sanders as the president of the United States, it's sophistry. By the way, he may be old, right? But his mind, even though it comes up with lunacy, is still pretty sharp. There's Cory Booker. Cory Booker. Spartacus for president. Does Cory Booker have a chance? I mean, I know there are Democrats listening to this broadcast. I know there are Democrats watching it right this very moment. Weigh in. Who would you like to see if Joe Biden was not running for re-election? Who would you like to see in your party run for re-election? 817-379-2172. Can hardly wait. Okay. Cory Booker. Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar has already run for president. She is already well known. She became a leftist crazy woman when Joe Biden became president, proving once again my assertion of earlier today that when socialism came calling for the Democrat Party, it didn't take much of a nudge for some of those Democrats to just fully embrace it. Just fully embrace socialism as if it was exactly what we need to do. Amy Klobuchar, I actually paid attention to her to begin with because I was listening to what she had to say. It wasn't out of range. It wasn't crazy. I wanted to hear her flesh out some of those ideas. And she did a good job. Did she have a chance of getting my vote? Absolutely not. But that's because I'm not interested in a Democrat having more power than they already have. Look what they do with it. And then there's a guy who has a real chance to be the president of the United States as a Democrat. Why? Because he's actually a Democrat, as opposed to a leftist, progressive, socialist, anti-American fascist. Who is it? You have any idea? Who am I talking about? Think of all the Democrats you know, and think of the one that does not exhibit any signs at all of being leftist, progressive, socialist, anti-American, and fascist. Do. Do you have any idea? Joe Manchin. If Joe Manchin ran for the presidency, he'd have a chance. This would expose the leftist socialist underbelly of the Democrat Party. It would split the party along those lines, but I really don't believe that socialists have as big a hold on the Democrat Party as people want us to believe, mainly in the media. Joe Manchin, Tulsi Gabbard. That would be a presidential ticket that would give the Republican frontrunner and their running mate a real run for their money. but it would require that the Democrat Party abandon leftist progressivism. Martha Brothers says, well, what about Tom Hanks? I'm not exactly sure Tom Hanks is a Democrat. I'm not exactly sure that Tom Hanks isn't a guy who is very carefully treading political waters in a very, very leftist biased business and doing it brilliantly. You know, he has no problem whatsoever finding stories that are pro-American, up to and including his most recent one, where he plays Colonel Tom Parker, the agent of Elvis Presley. So who's going to run? Who is going to run? Joe Biden should not. I think Joe Biden is, like I said, he's done his bit. He's done his bit for king and country. He needs to retire. And I'm not exactly sure that won't happen following the midterm election. Following the midterm election. Then the Democrat Party has to decide whether or not they're going to turn over the reins of government to Kamala Harris. The optics? Well, Kamala Harris would be the first black female president of the United States. And since we're willing to put people on the into very high offices based on skin color and gender, well, there you go. Kamala Harris. But is she a disaster? Yeah, sure is. But let's look at it from a standpoint of leftist progressivism. Okay, so Joe Biden is not running the presidency. The Presidium is doing it. The Presidium, probably Susan Rice and Barack Obama and James Clapper and John Brennan, James Comey, all those people, they're the people making the decisions, right? So, if indeed Kamala Harris becomes the president of the United States, the Presidium is still in power and will be for 2 years. 2 years. That would give Kamala Harris incumbent status. But I don't believe that would be anything close to being good for the United States of America. As a matter of fact, I think it would be a flaming disaster. Mainly because Kamala Harris, I don't believe, is up to that job. Now, once again, I said this before, by all means share your answer with me. What does Kamala Harris do really, really well? Okay? What qualifies her to be the president of the United States? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. What qualifies her to be the president of the United States? What does she do really well? I can't think of anything. I cannot think of anything. So of this group of people that I've come up with, I am scratching off Kamala Harris. I just don't think she's a president. I just don't believe so. I didn't think that John McCain was a president either. Okay? Just so you know. Michelle Obama and Jill Biden might have a chance. Gavin Newsom has destroyed California. I'm pretty sure that half California voters would vote against him because nearly half of California voters voted against him when they had a chance to recall him. So Gavin Newsom off the list, Bernie Sanders off the list because the United States of America is not going to elect a socialist president. Absolutely not. That leaves Cory Booker. Maybe. Cory Booker. And Amy Klobuchar. Also, Joe Manchin and Tulsi Gabbard. So we have Michelle and Jill. We have Corey and Amy, and we have Joe and Tulsi. Of all those people on this list, the only candidacy that I see that has a chance in 2024 would be Joe Manchin and Tulsi Gabbard. Not only would I listen to what they had to say, I would tell you to listen to what they have to say. Not because I would have much of a chance to vote for them, because I think Mike Pompeo is going to run, and I'm going to pay very close attention to that guy. Donald Trump is going to run, probably, and I'm going to pay very close attention to that guy. And there are a couple of other people in the wings. Mike Pence, I'm going to pay attention to that guy. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Hi, I'm John David Wells, wrapping up the third hour, the third podcast. Make sure you check out the other podcasts, please. I sure would appreciate it if you would. By the way, make sure you share this podcast with people you think might like it. And speaking of like it, please, by all means, like it. Please. And then I'll, of course, ring the bell. If you're on YouTube, and a lot of people are, just ring the bell. In other words, light the bell up so that whenever we're on the air, you hear about it. That would be very, very cool. By the way, for those people that had to hunt around for us because LinkedIn didn't carry the podcasts, LinkedIn wants me to join LinkedIn Live. And so I've been trying to do that. But I can't figure out how they how you join LinkedIn Live. So I asked them. I don't think they've gotten back to me yet, but there you go. So let's see. Let's see. Let me ask you. Do you remember those food names? Uncle Ben's got changed. Aunt Jemima got changed. What did they get changed to? You remember? Let's see. Aunt Jemima Majestic Interlude, was that what they changed it to? Aunt Jemima new name. New name. Aunt Jemima new name. Pearl Milling Company. Okay? So it's Pearl Milling Company, as if that changed anything. Let's see. Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben. New name. Ben's Original. Okay. So that's what they changed those to. And there have been some others like Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts is now Dunkin'. Yeah, I want to do some research. Okay. What does Dunkin' sell? Okay. What does Dunkin' Donuts sell? Yeah, that's a genius move that's going absolutely nowhere. There is a new name change out there, and this is essential. This is national news. It's important stuff, which is why I'm telling you about it. Kraft Macaroni and Cheese is changing its name after 85 years. It's true. After 85 years of giving macaroni and cheese a bad name, Kraft Macaroni and Cheese is changing its name. Okay? What did they change it to? Have any idea? Go ahead and think. Okay? What do you suppose they would change if Aunt Jemima is now Pearl Milling Company and Uncle Ben's is now Ben's Original? What would they change the name of Kraft Macaroni and Cheese to? That's right. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Well, at least it could have been worse. They could have named it Kraftwerk, which, by the way, was a German rock group back in the, I believe, 80s. Oh, a telephone call. A telephone call is poured in. Anyway, let me see who it is. Hi, this is the Wells Report. Hello? Wells Report. Darn. Anyway, Kraftwerk, and it was an avant-garde music thing that was mostly designed to test your resilience to noise. But anyway, that being, I know I sounded like an old guy right there. Yeah, I understand. Oh, by the way, there you go. KFC. What does KFC sell? Okay, what does Kentucky Fried Chicken sell? See, these are not good moves. Although I believe that Kraft Mac and Cheese, okay, the name change is meant to reflect the way fans organically talk about the brand. Along with a shortened name, shoppers will notice the box receiving a subtle makeover that includes a refreshed logo, typography, and single hue blue that amplifies the brand's most recognizable asset, the noodle smile. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Kraft said the new name and box are an effort to rebrand its mac and cheese as comfort food. Well, how about this? How about if you work on the recipe so that it tastes good? Seriously. I mean, my dad used to make the best mac and cheese in the world. How good is the mac and cheese that my dad used to make? My wife, Susan, is attempting to hijack the recipe and make it just as good as his. What's the new number? Okay, it's 817-379-2172. That's the new number. And by the way, you have approximately, 50 seconds to call. 817-379-2172. By the way, you can use that number anytime you want to. It's open 24/7, 365. Love to have you call. Now, I may not be here when you call, but I will set it up so you can leave a message. Okay? It'll probably have to ring 8 times or so. So there you go. That was Kathleen calling you back to see if you wanted an extension on your extended warranty, if you wanted to sell your second home. That's exactly who it was. And when I said the Wells Report, they went, oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. By the way, in case you're wondering, I bought a bunch of equipment today. Yeah, I spent a couple of $1,000s. Yow. Hello, hold on. Okay, I don't have time to take the call, but let it keep ringing. I will answer it as soon as I say bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Wells Report. I will see you tomorrow.